Hello everyone, and welcome to Spirit Monkey. I'm your host Francois, and in today's episode I will be discussing divination and some common methods of divining. The history or known origin of these methods, along with some details on how they are conducted, will be briefly explained. Now, divination can be defined as the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of supernatural powers. And now that's according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Or, as the Llewellyn Encyclopedia would state, the word divination is based on a Latin word that means the faculty of foreseeing. The word comes from the Latin word for divine power or of the gods. This indicates that the true meaning of the word divination is to make divine. Divination is not only used to gain insight into future events, but also to provide additional information on current events and even hidden truths of the past. Historically, a variety of divination methods have been and continues to be used by civilizations all over the world. Divination itself is understood to be ancient, dating back to early forms of shamanism of primitive human societies. The official documentation of divination methods, on the other hand, dates back to the earliest days of large civilization. Nicole Yelzavak of the University of Metaphysical Sciences states in Divination Systems that mankind has always had a desire to know what the future holds. Evidence shows that methods of divination, also known as fortune-telling, were used by the ancient Egyptians, Chinese, Babylonians, and the Sumerians, who resided in what's now known as Iraq, as early as 6,000 years ago. Yelzavak additionally states that divination can be divided into three categories. These are the interpretation of, firstly, natural phenomena, secondly, artificial phenomena, and thirdly, direct communication. Now, divination through natural phenomena involves the interpretation of worldly manifestations, such as something you'll see in Geomancy, referring to a variety of divination methods pertaining to animals and their behavior, or selenomancy, referring to divination of lunar phenomena, or pyromancy, divination by the interpretation of the movements and characteristics of fire. The use of natural phenomena in divination can also be referred to as augury, which has become a common misused term for divination itself. Augury itself was especially popular in Roman society, as the priests interpreted animals, weather, and celestial occurrences, to name a few. Now, augury most commonly is referred to divination through the means of birds, but that's not its true meaning. On the other hand, we have artificial phenomena in divination, and is generally more well known and practiced by modern-day magic-minded individuals. Examples of these methods will include something like Cartomancy, which is divination with a deck of cards such as the Taro or Oracle decks, or ruin casting, divination with Norse rune stones, or osteomancy, which is the interpretation of scattered bones that you'll see in traditional shamanism quite a lot. Now, numerology and modern geomancy also falls into this category, to name a simple few. But in essence, these divination methods rely primarily on tools and methods constructed by human practitioners, while natural phenomena relies on interpretations of events and objects outside of human influence in the natural world. Now, the third type of divination is called direct communication. Now, it is concerned with divination with the help of spiritual forces. This usually occurs in trance and dream states, where a being, ancestor, spirit or deity directly interacts with the individual in order to provide the desired insights. Now, direct communication can include practices such as psychomancy and necromancy, which is the communication with departed spirits or ancestors. Clairsensing can also fall in this category, as certain messages from spirits are received by means of hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting and smelling. Now there's also reflective scrying, which uses a bowl of water, for example, crystals or mirrors to contact spirits for communication. Now these forms of divination are usually more intense compared to the other methods of artificial and natural phenomena due to the contact with actual otherworldly beings, and is therefore practiced to a lesser extent. This is due to the general societal fear and judgment towards most people who practice this type of divination, so they usually reserve it for in their private time or in certain occult structures itself. Now please note that these classifications are not fixed and final. Many of the divination methods can be understood as being a combination of the various types that Yelzavak identifies. Now these classifications are for convenience purposes above all else. But now that you understand the basic definition and classifications of divination systems, let's have a quick look at some commonly used divination methods, just so you can understand how they fall into these different types. Now the three examples that I will discuss in this video are firstly the Taro, a very popular system, then Geomancy, which is a bit less commonly used but also very interesting and effective, and then thirdly Scrying, because of a complete different paradigm that can fall in. These three can be argued to be purely artificial methods of divination. However, Geomancy and Scrying do have other facets to them that will label them as interpretation of either natural phenomenon or pure direct communication. Now, Taro is probably the most known and practiced version of divination in the West, while modern Geomancy and Scrying are a bit less practiced. However, they still remain prevalent in modern magic, literature, and organizations, and I find a lot of people do have real interest in these methods. Please note that this is simply a short little explanation and history of these divination methods. So this isn't a how-to guide, but I encourage anyone to go and read up, like always, as much as they can on these various topics. First up, we have the Taro. Taro is a form of Cartomancy, using a deck of cards, and as such, it falls into the category of artificial phenomenon. Now, the deck is comprised of 78 cards, which is separated into two groups. The first group of cards, also known as the trumps or major arcana, consist of 22 cards. Each of these cards have an element, celestial body, or astrological sign attributed to it, along with a number, which determines its correlation to the Hebrew alphabet. Each of the major arcana have a name with their primary meaning and symbolism assigned to it. These include cards such as the High Priestess, the Devil, the Star, and all the others. Now, the major arcana are also related to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, in that each of the 22 cards represent one of the 22 paths between the 10 spheres represented on the tree. The other set of cards is called the minor arcana, or suits, and is comprised of 4 sets of 14 cards each. Not much unlike a typical playing card deck. Now, each set is assigned a symbol which is directly related to its elemental meaning or attribution. Now, the element and its symbol does vary from deck to deck. However, many of the symbols are universal. For example, it is common to see a deck featuring the symbol of wands as fire, sword as air, cups as water, and pentacles as earth. Now, each set of 14 cards consists of 1 to 10 numbered cards, followed by 4 usually royal cards, such as the prince, princess, queen, and king. In certain decks, these royals may be replaced with something like a knight or pages in others. Each suit or element is also related to the 4 worlds on the Kabbalistic tree of life, ascending from pentacles or earth element in Asaya, the material world, to wands or fire in the upper world of the tree, which is called Atziluth, or the world of archetypes. In the divinatory practice of Taro, cards are drawn and put into a spread, then revealed and interpreted systematically in order to gain insight into either the past, present, or future forces. Now, each card has a general meaning and common interpretation related to it. Not just the primary or main major arcana, but also the lesser arcana or suit cards. Now, however, with all forms of divination, your personal intuition is required to understand the card meaning in relation to the question that was asked. It is also required to see how all the cards relate to one another in a spread, along with their mutual or contradictory effects upon one another. Now, there are multiple spreads that can be used in this practice. The spread itself simply refers to how many cards are drawn, along with how they are arranged and what each card then means in the spread. Now, many spreads would place cards in a certain pattern, where each position refers to a different question or aspect of the question which is asked. The most common spreads are the 1 card, 3 card, and then Celtic cross spread, which can be seen as the beginner spreads, or the ones that you'll come across the most often. The Celtic cross in this case is far more complex than the 1 card and 3 card spreads, because it's a lot more in-depth, using a total of 10 cards, revealing different aspects or details related to the divined question. Now let's move on to the history of Taro. The history of Taro remains a topic of great debate. The commonly accepted theory, however, is that the Taro system, as it is known today, evolved from what is known as Mamluk Cards, a type of card game. These cards were originally introduced to Europe during the 14th century military expansion of the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, which spread into North Africa and some parts of Western Europe. From here, the Mamluk decks gained popularity as a card game initially, and was quickly adapted to fit the European culture. In the 1480s, the standard playing card deck of 54 cards, as is still used today, was developed. As for the Taro deck, however, different versions existed until around the beginning of the 1500s, when the Gutenberg press was able to mass print a deck of tarot cards. Now, this mass printing led to the standardization of the tarot trump or major arcana cards, sort of setting their name in place. At this stage, the trump cards were simply used in another type of game, instead of actual divination. The mass printing allowed for a larger portion of the populace to own tarot decks, due to the heavily reduced costs caused by the presses. Before that, if you wanted a deck of cards, you'd have to have them hand painted. Now, very few cases of witchcraft trials during about the 16th century report the use of cartomancy as a form of divination, which of course led to the death of a couple of people. Whether this was simply an excuse or not is still unknown. Other than this example of cartomancy's use in divination, it will only be in 1781 when the first actual true publication of cartomancy as a divinatory practice would be published in a French magazine called Le Monde Primitif, or however you really pronounce that. From this time onward, more and more divination methods and practices of the tarot would start to enter society. It was only later that occultists started linking the tarot to Kabbalah and the Hebrew number and letter systems, while others would attribute the divinatory tarot system to ancient Egyptian occultism. Whatever the truth behind the history of tarot, it is clear that the divination system will not pass away soon, and may continue to adapt with the intervention of new modern major occultists. Some of the occultists still argue that the tarot is an ancient system that disguised itself as a card game simply to protect itself from inquisition and general fear and hate of anything that's magical. But whatever the truth may be, it does not eliminate the tarot's effectiveness or popularity. Next up we have Geomancy. Geomancy refers to a specific system of divination which incorporates multiple sets of random numbered dots in order to determine geomantic figures. The practitioner would subconsciously place a number of dots in a row, then count them to determine whether it is an equal or odd number. If the row has equal numbers, it will be equal and marked as 2 dots, while odd numbers will be reduced to a single dot. Thus, each row will have 1 or 2 dots. This procedure is continued until the practitioner reaches 4 sets of 4 lines each. Each set of these tetragrams, as they are known, totaling 4 lines, creates a geomantic figure. Now, the 4 lines in a set is also attributed to the 4 elements. So fire relates to the first row and earth to the bottom row, for example. From this initial 4 sets, known as the mothers, the second set is created by adding the top row of each mother, then the second row, and then on until another 4 geomantic figures based on the elemental line of the mothers are created. This creates the 4 daughters. Now this process varies a little with each step as one creates the next sets, called the nieces and nephews, which is another 4 sets, then the witnesses, which is another 2 set, and then the judge, which is 1 set. This is laid out in what is known as a shield chart, and provides the final geomantic figure that will be used for interpretation. Now, the first 12 geomantic figures or tetragrams can also be used in a different way other than the shield chart, by placing them in what is known in Geomancy as a square zodiacal chart, or 12 houses of heaven, and this provides a more in-depth interpretation. The geomantic figures are each unique and carry a distinct meaning along with them. Each geomantic figure that can be constructed is related to an element, has a unique name, and unique general meaning or interpretation. In the shield chart, the judge is usually the final tetragram. However, some systems do formulate a 16th tetragram, known as a reconciler, by using the judge and another tetragram. However, some practitioners do not do this. When the tetragrams are laid out in the other chart, the square zodiacal chart or the 12 houses of heaven, each tetragram represents something unique according to the house that it falls in. This creates an overview or set of simple answers that can be collectively interpreted in the entire chart, unlike the shield chart where a single geomantic figure is the end result. Geomancy in itself is rather diverse, as different cultures have their own minor tweaks to it. However, in general, the system actually remains the same all over the world. Both the shield and houses of heaven method is effective. However, certain practitioners do have their own unique ways of conducting and interpreting geomancy. Even though the systemic approach of modern geomancy can be placed into the category of artificial phenomena, the fact remains that this method can be conducted with only a stick and the ground to draw on. Thus, modern geomancy may be placed into the category of natural phenomena, just as ancient or typical forms of geomancy would be considered to be, such as simply interpreting signs that fall naturally on the ground. When it comes to the history of geomancy, it is also widely debated. Now, geomancy as it is known today has little to do with simply divining the natural earthly world and its phenomena. Modern geomancy is a complete and detailed divinatory system that is very well defined compared to simply divining natural earth phenomena and patterns of the wilderness. Now, forms of the geomantic divination system, as we even use today, was already present in the Middle East for an unknown amount of time before it entered into Europe, Africa and the Far East in about the 12th century. Now, some do argue that this system stems from Roman Sabian forms of divination, and that this form of geomancy has been in Europe long before the 12th century. So just like Taro, the history of geomancy remains widely debated and more of a mystery than an actual answer. Getting to the third divination method I want to discuss, scrying. Now, scrying is the act of staring into a reflective surface, such as a mirror, pool, or crystal bowl, usually in a state of altered consciousness, in order to receive visions or communicate with other people or entities. Now, the word scry stems from descry, meaning to reveal or to successfully discern. Due to the variable nature in which scrying is performed, it may easily fall into different divination categories. If a mirror or crystal bowl is used, for example, it may be argued to be artificial, while if the surface is a still pool in a natural area, it can easily be classified as a natural phenomenon. However, scrying is a method often used to contact and communicate other spiritual entities. Thus, scrying tends to fall more into the category of direct communication rather than natural or artificial phenomena. In the practice of scrying, the practitioner will enter an altered state of consciousness either through meditation, self-hypnosis, or some other means. Then, by staring into the reflective surface, be able to perceive certain visions of events, places, and people of the past, present, and future. It is in this state that the practitioner will be able to channel messages from the subconscious mind or from the spirit realm while staring into the surface. The reflective surface is attributed to the element of water and the subconscious mind. These attributations are symbolically and directly linked to another important factor to most scrying occultists, which is the moon. It is because of the moon's powerful push and pull effect on the human subconscious mind that causes occultists to work along with the moon when conducting this practice. For example, when it is full moon, your subconscious mind tends to be more at the forefront of your conscious mind, while when it is new moon, it is far more repressed in the back of your subconscious mind. Typically, before a scrying session, the practitioner will perform a type of ritual, either to honor the act or to honor whatever entity they may wish to contact. This reinforces the practitioner's attitude and seriousness towards the activity, while also preparing them mentally for the session. Now, the act of altering the consciousness is also performed either as part of the ritual or separate from it, maybe before or after the ritual. As with all forms of divination, a clear and open state of mind is required. In the act of scrying, this is especially true, as there can be no interpretations or messages when the scryer is not in the applicable state of mind. Or perhaps they might receive something, but not be able to fully comprehend the message. Scrying, therefore, requires a lot of practice and dedication to do it properly when compared to some of the other forms of divination, where an interpretation can be reached without intensely altering the state of mind, or by simply receiving messages into the self instead of something that's outside of the practitioner. Since much of the purpose of scrying is to contact spiritual entities, the seriousness of the act cannot be understated. Due to the risk of harm, as many believe, but actually the psychological and spiritual impact that can be left on the practitioner when not mentally or spiritually prepared for such an encounter. If the practitioner is ill-prepared, fear of harm, judgment, self-value, etc. may take hold, which will be detrimental. Historically, scrying has been used in some form or another by most ancient civilizations and very many tribal shamanic practices. It is universal. To again quote Yalzavak, she states that witches and magicians, a wise man or wise woman, and the most common stereotype, the gypsy fortune teller using her crystal ball, have all used scrying. Additionally, the ancient civilizations of the Egyptians, Aztecs, Incas, Romans, Chinese, Arabs, and many others have all practiced this form of divination in some form. The Native American tribes, the Apache and the Cherokee, use crystals, as do the Australian Aborigines and tribes of Borneo and New Guinea. It then seems that any civilizational culture to have or to continue to believe and interact with the spirit world use a form of scrying. With the expansion and open use of scrying in Europe after the Dark Ages, Many occultists refine the methods, tools and rituals used in mirror scrying. These refinements include crafting the mirror with certain sigils, powdered herbs, crystals and other little powdered items, whichever is attributed to the moon, to be hidden on the backside of the mirror, for example, while signs and letters attributed to certain forms of magical practice are put into the frame in order to both empower and protect the user. Now, there are quite a couple of very famous occultists to have used mirror scrying. One of them especially is the Dr. John Dee, who was the court magician for Queen Elizabeth I, which had a lot to do with Enochian magic and trying to communicate with angelic beings. In conclusion, we can see the immense diversity of divination methods available for us to explore. The diversity is not merely found within divination methods in general, but also the ways in which individual methods are conducted and interpreted. Many of the methods of divination have been with humanity since its very early development, and from there has developed into complex systems with set rules and codes. Divination types or categories, which are natural, artificial, or direct, are merely convenient labeling systems, as each divination system remains unique and often can fall into multiple categories or not fit into one specific one at all. This is not the important part, however, as the most important factor to remember is to use your own personal intuition and inner communication skills in order to properly interpret a session. This will allow for more of a direct and useful answers, as the divination is set to accommodate your personal psyche and perceptions. Remember that you have the power, it's not up to the system. The system is only there for convenience. With all this said, I hope the information in this video was valuable to you, and I would love to hear from you guys what forms of divination you use. What systems? Are they old, new? Are they your own? Are they rather strict and set in place? But until then, keep well. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. If you liked the video, please click like and subscribe. Also check out our main webpage, spiritmonkey.me, for a lot more interesting articles and links to all the other pages. And also check out our Patreon page. If you feel like giving $1, please do. It's all appreciated. Other than that, have an awesome day. Cheers.